Attention real estate enthusiasts, if you've ever bought or sold a house, you won't want to miss out on this groundbreaking update that is shaking up our industry. Unless you've been living under a rock, you have heard probably something about this NAR settlement and class action lawsuit. Hi there, I'm Erica Parker, your queen of real estate with the Best Life Texas Group. I am thrilled to be bringing this video to you today. We are going to start off by talking about the National Association of Realtors settlement, what this means for buyers and sellers, and how to move forward in this market. All right, so the NAR settlement, National Association of Realtors, is what NAR stands for, and how it affects you. So moving into, we are going to talk about the story so far. We're then going to talk about the March 15th NAR settlement and what is actually in there. And then we're going to talk about what this means for you. Now, starting off, just to give you a little background on what is actually going on, there was a class action lawsuit that was filed in Missouri, and it claimed that there was conspiracy to inflate commissions and that there was price fixing on commissions, and it wasn't a free market on the negotiating of commissions. That's what it was claiming. Now, there were certain parties it named, like the NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, and other brokerages via the co-op compensation. So in that particular lawsuit, Missouri actually got a verdict that had a settlement attached to that. So it then became a lot of copycat lawsuits afterwards. And it just basically has become a mess. So NAR came up with a settlement for certain class action lawsuits, and these are the highlights of that. The first one, Rule 1, it does away with co-op compensation. And what that was is that if you've ever sold a house, a lot of times the listing agent will say, okay, we're going to sell it at 6%. And then if a buyer comes that has representation, I will pay 3% of that 6% to the buyer's agent. Another thing that was required on the MLS, which is the multiple listing services, it's where all the brokerages put their properties on the internet for different realtors to look at all of the information about them. That was a requirement on the MLS previously, that you had to offer a cooperating brokerage compensation. So that's that 3% to a buyer's agent. So that removes that requirement from the MLS, but it does allow a seller to offer a buyer's agent compensation. The only thing is that that buyer's agent compensation offer cannot be on the MLS, and it cannot be required by the MLS, which is what Rule 3 says, in that they are going to do away with the input of being able to put the co-op compensation on anywhere in the MLS, whether it be voluntary or required. In the past, it was required. Now, it's not even going to be voluntary. It's not allowed to be on there at all. Now, what they did say is that brokerages can put that buyer's agent compensation that's being offered by a seller on their own individual brokerage websites. And in order to do that, you also have to agree to that in the listing agreement. So it will decouple the 6% to 3% to a listing agent. And if the seller is offering 3% to a buyer's agent, then it needs to be agreed to in the listing agreement before it can be marketed that way on the brokerage's individual websites. So some of the myths that have come out of this is that home prices will drop. That's not necessarily the case. The home prices, we have strong markets out there, and for home prices to drop 3% is unlikely. What you also are going to hear is that the 6% commission will cease to be the norm. I don't believe that's the case. There may be some people that go to fee-based commissions on the buyer's side, and I'll talk about that in the future, but you're still likely to see that 3% will go to a listing agent, maybe 4%, depending on what they are providing in terms of services. But on the buyer side, it's still going to be a 3% commission so long as that realtor can show their value proposition. The next one, steering, will be less common. That is not necessarily going to be this case. Now, I don't like using steering as a term because steering usually has a negative connotation of and it's not allowed because you're not allowed to tell someone to live one place and not another because they're not going to want to live there for some reason. What might happen is that buyers that have a realtor that is charging a 3% commission may ask their realtor to only show them properties that are offering a buyer agent commission of 3%. So that is something that we would then have to tell, we'd have more transparency with our buyer client and saying, hey, you've liked this particular property. They're not offering a buyer agent compensation. Do you want to move forward with seeing it? So there's going to be more transparency in discussions prior to going to show a property as well. What you also are hearing is that 1 million real estate agents will get out of the industry. There's about 1.5 million real estate agents in the industry right now in the US. And I don't see 1 million getting out of it. Now, I do see quite a few getting out of it because those that don't have the skill set to explain their value to you, both as a buyer's agent and as a listing agent, they will not be sustainable in this market and show people that they should be hired if they cannot articulate their value proposition. So I do think there will be quite a few people that no longer work in the industry, but 1 million, that's a really big number. And finally, the Amazon, Zillow, and unicorns will make realtors obsolete. This is not the case. Realtors provide a very specific service, and it's not just finding a home online. That's not it at all. We provide help in getting your home prepared, in giving you strategies on marketing. We actually do marketing for you on the listing side. We actually give you pricing strategies, what your home is worth, how to bring in a larger buyer pool. On the buyer side, we're going to provide you with, is this home the right price? We have neighborhood knowledge, local knowledge of the areas so that you know where you want to live. We also have the skill set on both sides to negotiate and make sure that we are working as hard as possible to get the best deal for our client. Whereas my client doesn't necessarily know all the ins and outs of a contract and how every little thing on those terms could affect their bottom line. So saying that realtors will be obsolete is a gross overstatement. Now, what this means for you as a buyer or a seller, we're going to start with sellers. So first, you're going to see the decoupling of commissions. And I've discussed that briefly. You're going to have 3% to the listing agent, and then you can determine whether you want to offer a buyer's agent compensation. Now, something that you might want to consider is that you will have a marketing disadvantage if you don't offer a buyer's agent compensation. This is something that has been offered in the past, and unless all the sellers out there go and determine, nope, we're not going to offer a buyer's agent compensation anymore, you will be at a marketing disadvantage because there will be buyers out there that say, I don't want to see a property that's not offering a buyer's agent compensation. And there will be a lot less people. Your buyer pool will shrink considerably if you're not offering a buyer's agent compensation. Another thing I want to point out is that if you're not offering a buyer's agent compensation in that affordable housing category, usually whatever's less than the average price of homes in that area, I would highly recommend rethinking that strategy. And the reason for that is a lot of these people that are coming to you to buy the homes are using FHA loans, they're using VA loans, they're using 1% down loans with grants. They're using a lot of stuff because they need the help, and they're already asking for sellers concessions to help cover closing costs. So if you're not offering a buyer's agent compensation as well, they won't have the money to bring to the table to close on that deal. So they're immediately going to take themselves off the list and not come see your home. So that's where you have disadvantages because you are shrinking your buyer pool because of that. Now, the next one is that there may be a new negotiable term on the contract. Right now, in page 10 of the TREC contract, it says that the listing broker will give the buyer's broker a percentage of the purchase price based on what is on the MLS. But since that cooperating compensation is being done away with, then it needs to be placed somewhere else in the contract to say how we want to negotiate those terms. And right now, it's not included in the closing costs that are asked for in seller concessions, but there may be a potential increase in the maximum of seller concessions for loans if it's not necessarily made a negotiable term but rolled into all of the closing costs. So right now, FHA loans allow for 6% of the purchase price to go towards closing costs and seller concessions, and conventional loans allow 3% of the purchase price to go towards closing costs and seller concessions. With this new element, if they do not have a separate term for the commission on a buyer's agent compensation, they will probably roll this into seller concessions and need to increase those limits to 9% and 6%. Now, here in Houston, please keep in mind that we are getting closer and closer to a neutral market, which means those that don't offer a buyer's agent compensation will be far less likely to sell than those that are offering that. It is no longer a seller's market like it was during the pandemic when this particular class action lawsuit came about, but being in a more neutral market to get it sold and to get on with your next chapter in your life, you may want to consider offering that buyer's agent compensation. Now, for a buyer's side, here's what I believe will become very important. The first thing is that you interview realtors. It's no longer finding a realtor that will open a door for you. It's about finding a realtor that has that value proposition that you're looking for, that is going to give you that value that you're looking for, show you what's going on in that neighborhood, give you the time to talk to you about the value of those homes in that neighborhood if you found one that you like, and going into the background of researching those before you even get to the property. There are a lot of agents out there that were previously just door openers, and I know that's frustrating for me even as an agent to say, but they didn't do the background research before putting together their home tours that they were going to go on. They didn't have a buyer's broker agreement signed, which is the next thing that I anticipate being something that comes up. So moving forward, I do believe that realtors are going to require a buyer's broker agreement or buyer representation agreement. Here in Texas is what it's called. And they will agree to either a fee-based or a commission-based compensation. And it may be a mix of both. So it may be that someone charges you $100 an hour to go show you all of the properties that you want to see, and then an extra $2,500 to write the contract for you. But maybe you don't want their services after writing that contract, so you don't have to pay them from there. So it'd be more fee-based, like an attorney in that case. Or you may find that commissions will work best here in agreeing still to the 3%, but then knowing that it might be something that's negotiable on the contract. So there will be some give and take on that brokerage. There will be fee-based brokerages, just like on the listing side, but I do anticipate that most brokers will try and stick to that 3% commission and negotiating that on the contract. The next thing is determining a strategy for browsing properties. Are you going to only want to look at those properties that are offering a buyer's agent compensation so that you don't have to come out of pocket? Or do you want to look at properties that aren't necessarily marketing that, but could possibly give you that in a negotiating setting? Because you could fall in love with a home that you can't necessarily afford if they don't offer that buyer's agent compensation. You may or may not want to look at those properties, and a buyer's agent may or may not want to show those properties if they don't believe that you can get that price. Because a buyer's agent's time is worth it as well. We are one of the only industries that actually don't charge upfront and put all of our money and time forward prior to even getting paid and possibly not even getting paid. So you may see more fee-based for those that don't feel like they have that value proposition or don't feel like they have that ability of negotiating as well as others. And so, you get what you pay for in this sense. The next thing I wanted to note was that will be negotiable on who pays the fees and who pays the commission. So that will either be on the contract or part of a seller's concession. So keep that in mind, is that this will become negotiable, and it's already been negotiable between a buyer and the agent. Those realtors that know their value are going to stick hard to their commission because they know they can negotiate better than others. They know that they can earn their commission. And so they will stick to their value and know their value and not necessarily negotiate with you on being able to represent you. There will be more unrepresented buyers. There will be buyers out there that just give a call to the listing agent and want to go see it. Well, there's going to be requirements before a listing agent will open a door or have one of their showing agents open a door, and that will be getting your pre-approval letter and doing certain things to get in order, because it's less time consuming for them to only open doors for people that qualify. So you as a buyer may have to go and do some stuff on your own if you don't want to be represented. But note that you could be taken to the cleaners if you don't have that representation. Now, one of the sayings I love and what I kind of equate this to is a person going to court and representing themselves and going up against an attorney that's seasoned, knows the nuances of court and how it needs to go forward, how to question witnesses, how to move forward with each of those nuances and the expertise that an attorney has, and someone going to court unrepresented, trying to represent themselves in a very serious case that could affect their lives. It's the very same thing here as a realtor, in that you're going to make the biggest purchase of your life, basically. And going in unrepresented means that you are at a severe disadvantage. A saying that I hear a lot coming from a family of attorneys is, a person that chooses to represent themselves has a fool for a client. And I like this saying. I know it seems kind of unfeeling, but I like this saying because it is true and honest, in that if someone goes to buy a house that has no idea of how the market is done or how all of those contract terms add up to a bottom line, then they could go in signing into a contract that they can't afford, or they may grossly overpay for a property, not knowing that it should have been priced less because of that. We have sellers that go unrepresented into the market, and we have statistics that show a person that sells a house without a realtor sells it on average 17% less. So even though they think they're saving on the commission by not paying the 6% or even the 3% to a listing agent, they are actually losing in the grand scheme of things, and they're making about 11% less than if they had been on the market and offered a buyer's agent compensation on top of that. So it's definitely important for you to realize these items before you try and represent yourself, either on the seller side or the buyer side. And then finally, we may see people waiting longer to purchase, which then dwindles your buyer pool again. And so keeping that in mind, you may have to wait longer if you are a buyer, if you want to buy. So this actually takes effect going into July. So as a buyer, you need to consider this moving forward on, do you need to wait? Or are you going to go along the strategies that I discussed on only seeing properties that have a buyer's agent compensation, or ones that you feel you can negotiate that into the purchase price? Thank you for joining me on this eye-opening journey about the National Association of Realtors Settlement. As we navigate these exciting changes together, remember that knowledge is power. If you are a buyer or seller eager to strategize in this evolving market, don't hesitate to schedule a consultation. There is a link in the description below. Your goals are our priority, and we're here to guide you every step of the way. Got questions or comments on today's topic? Drop it in the comments below. I'll be keeping an eye on the discussion and personally responding to each one. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and let's make the most of this new era of real estate. I'm Erica Parker. Bye for now.